Dan here, Vagabond Buddha. I just finished my run. I'm here in Hanoi, Vietnam, yeah. Around a lake. I love this temple. I don't know if you can see that temple there in the middle of the lake, but it's about 7:30 in the morning. It's a bit warm here, so I run early, which sometimes I do even when it's cold, but oh, you can't see me. I'm not sure you care, but so I'm in the middle of the city. This is my favorite part of Hanoi. I like to run around this lake and watch all the people. And they're doing yoga and dances, all sorts of dancing, Western dance, Tai Chi, all sorts of, and it's a very peaceful place. It's in the middle of the city. There's lots of noise and cars and motorcycles. But that, if you will, distractions are only a distraction if you label them as such and believe in it. The freedom of being in the present moment is unconditional. Any conditions we place on it are mind-made. And so you can live in the present moment if you decide to, which is sort of like living in your experience. In some ways, the mind is kind of a speaking, or it has sort of an idea about everything that's happening all the time. It has a problem it's solving, or it has some puzzle that it's confused about. It's trying to find the winning formula for you to win life, if you will. And so the mind is a thought, one after another. It's silent sometimes, and behind the mind is a listening, if you will, an experiential being that's the peace of God in you. And when the mind's silent, or when you no longer believe you are your mind, but you are listening to your mind, like a friend giving you advice rather than being yourself, being you. Instead of being your mind, you're kind of passively listening to it, like advice from an old friend, your oldest friend, in fact. That's why you trust it. So if you listen and read some of the gurus, you kind of get the idea that your mind is a bad thing. Whether your mind's creating pain for you, or whether it's telling you that the situation you're in is good, or whether it's telling you the situation you're in is bad, it's speaking. And the choice of words, the choice of thought, the choice of picking one course of action is a kind of a contrived way of living. But which you have to do. You have to decide whether to dip each French fry in ketchup or not. You have to decide each step whether you're going to the left or right or forward. So there are decisions to make. But whether or not you live in the decision, or whether you live in your experience of making a decision, that's the choice you get to make. If you're living in the decision, if you believe your mind is right, if you believe your mind has the answers, or if you just believe your mind at all, and you think what it says is true rather than that just it's a stream of consciousness that you're listening to. It's a stream of choice consciousness you're choosing over and over and over again. Or maybe you have no choice. The mind may not have a choice. It's just choosing based on what it thinks is correct, based on a subset of information. And that's all painful. If you're believing it's right, or you're believing your mind, or you're believing that you're that name that they call you. But if you're the listening behind it, if you live in the listening, and you listen to everything, including your mind, that's where peace is. There's 1,000 or 1,000,000 different people, or however many there is, I don't even know how many, that have lived in both states and have tried to explain it. And it's kind of an odd thing to try to explain. But it's not hard to get there. Once you understand that you're not your mind, and you quit being a listening from a space of mind, but you be a listening whether or not your mind has anything to say. The difference is, it's so subtle that your mind's able to confuse you and tell you it's complicated. The mind's like a child. It's like a first child. And when the second child's trying to be born, the first child's not too happy about giving attention to the second child or even acknowledging it's there. So one of the things I've noticed about living an experience is it's very where your attention is different, in some ways. Like when your mind has a thought and you're living in mind space, you inhabit the thought like it's the only thing in the universe, and you see everything else through it. Like when you're deciding, you're collecting information and you're making a decision based on the information. So all the information you see is based on the decision grid that you're using to make the decision. So the decision is kind of made before you even make it, because where you're seeing the information from is very limited. But when your mind is listened to as like you listen to the wind or the cars going by on the street, there's little, I should say, maybe, I don't know if "no" is the right word, you're not wedded to the decision based on the filter of the mind's seeing of the information. You're seeing the information. You're seeing the all, or the experience, or the data is coming at you experientially at the same moment. That a small spot within all of that experience is filtering it, or your mind. So the wind is like the wind you can feel through your whole body, and what your mind hears is it's too windy, or you need to put on your coat, or it comes to some conclusion about the wind. It's not in the wind. It's a decision about wind. It's a waiting conclusion. So you're not really seeing the wind. You're not being with the wind. You're being in a decision about the wind. You're seeing, and that applies to your whole life. Your whole life is being in a decision about the environment. It's not in the environment. And it seems like maybe the cutting off of the experience is maybe what causes the pain somehow. Like, because you're not experiencing the all, there's a cutting off. Sometimes I wonder if experiencing the all is kind of like a direct relationship that you have with Source. Kind of like when you listen, you learn. And when you're cutting off listening by filtering to make decision, you're cutting off information or data, or you're cutting off other options. And so the pain comes in the decision itself. And it may not be coming in the decision, it may be coming in the cutting off of the information. Kind of like, it's a denial of your relationship with Source when you live in mind. It's a sort of a kind of a young personality way of being, like, I'm right, this is the right direction, all of that other stuff is unnecessary. Those are all words describing something. And so, in fact, the words I'm using to describe something that's not limited is limited. Once by me, because I'm filtering all to come up with individual words and painting a picture, and the incomplete picture, because words were used to paint it, and it's painted in my mind. But then you listen, and you hear the same words, and you paint a different picture. In that respect, I suppose that's why society is in some ways defined by language. Maybe that's why art feels so uplifting, or why a walk in the park seems so uplifting. Because you can just be in the park. You don't have to interpret anything. But that same non-interpretation you can take out of the park and just be in it in your life. There's I always wonder why is it the deciding that causes human suffering? Is it it's the filtering, it seems to me, that, like the shutting off of the information that the human mind does, that is probably what causes the pain. And in present moment awareness, can you somehow you're able to make choice without that cutting off? Almost like you're choosing from emptiness rather than you're choosing without a reason, without an analysis. You're choosing out of present awareness, present experience. You're choosing without analysis, without mind analysis. You're just choosing. Is there a wisdom of choosing without thought? The thought itself has to be a choice, and somehow you have to enumerate what the choices are, or at least know what they are to pick. But is that a thought? Or can you know that experientially without your... Clearly, to voice your choice, you have to pick a word. I guess you could point. Is pointing not a choice? Anyway, just some odd thoughts.